In the summer of 1945, the Japanese Empire stood at the edge of annihilation, yet its leaders still spoke the language of honor, sacrifice, and death before surrender. For nearly 4 years, Japan had fought a brutal war across the Pacific and Asia, conquering vast territories in the name of the emperor, only to see those gains slowly crushed by American industrial power and relentless island-hopping campaigns. By July 1945, Japanese cities lay in ruins, its navy was shattered, its air force reduced to desperate suicide attacks, and its people were starving. And yet, the war had not ended. Inside Tokyo, behind scorched streets and burned-out neighborhoods, a final deadly struggle was unfolding, not against the Allies, but within Japan's own leadership. The Emperor of Japan, Hirohito, was a living god to his people, believed to be descended from the sun goddess Amaterasu. His voice had never been heard by the public, his decisions wrapped in ritual and silence. Around him stood the Supreme Council for the direction of the war, known as the Big Six, divided evenly between those who wanted to continue fighting and those who quietly believed the war was already lost. Prime Minister Kantaro Suzuki, a former admiral, knew Japan could not survive another year of war. Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo desperately searched for a way out, hoping the Soviet Union might act as a mediator. On the other side stood War Minister Korechika Anami, a hardline general who believed surrender would destroy the soul of Japan itself. On July 26, 1945, the United States, Britain, and China issued the Potsdam Declaration, demanding Japan's unconditional surrender. It promised destruction if Japan refused, but it did not clearly state the fate of the emperor. To many Japanese leaders, this omission was fatal. The declaration was discussed behind closed doors, and after hours of debate, the government chose a single word to describe its response, mokusatsu, meaning to withhold comment. To the Allies, it sounded like outright rejection. The countdown to catastrophe had begun. On August 6, 1945, at 8:15 in the morning, a single American B-29 bomber named Enola Gay dropped a weapon unlike any the world had ever seen. The atomic bomb exploded over Hiroshima with the force of more than 15,000 tons of TNT. In seconds, tens of thousands of people were vaporized, buildings flattened, and the city turned into a burning wasteland. Survivors wandered through the ruins with skin hanging from their arms, blinded by the flash, choking on radioactive dust. In Tokyo, news arrived slowly and incompletely. Many military leaders refused to believe that a single bomb could destroy an entire city. Some argued it was merely a new type of incendiary attack. Others insisted Japan must fight on, no matter the cost. 3 days later, on August 9th, the unimaginable happened again. A second atomic bomb fell on Nagasaki, killing tens of thousands more. On the same day, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan and launched a massive invasion of Japanese-occupied Manchuria. This was the final shock. For months, Japan had pinned its hopes on Moscow as a neutral mediator. Now the Red Army was crushing the elite Kwantung Army, destroying Japan's last illusion of strategic leverage. Inside the Imperial Palace, the mood shifted from denial to despair. Emperor Hirohito listened silently as his advisors presented the grim reality. Japan faced annihilation from the air, invasion from the sea, and now destruction from the north. The nation was bleeding to death. For the first time in history, the emperor prepared to intervene directly in a political decision. On July 9th, the Supreme War Council met in deadlock. 3 members demanded surrender, 3 demanded continued resistance. The argument went on for hours, voices raised, fists slammed on tables. Finally, Prime Minister Suzuki asked the emperor to break the tie. Hirohito spoke softly, but his words carried the weight of centuries. He said the war must end. He said the suffering of the people had become unbearable. He said Japan must accept the Potsdam Declaration on the condition that the emperor's position be preserved. It was a moment without precedent. The living God had chosen surrender. But the war was not over yet. Within the Japanese army, rage and disbelief spread like wildfire. To many officers, surrender was worse than death. A group of young, fanatical officers decided they would rather destroy the imperial institution than allow Japan to surrender. Led by Major Kenji Hatanaka, they planned a coup d'etat to seize the Imperial Palace, prevent the surrender broadcast, and force the nation to fight on until extinction. On the night of August 14, Tokyo trembled in darkness under blackout conditions. Rebel officers moved through the city, assassinating senior commanders who opposed them and spreading false orders. They surrounded the Imperial Palace, killing the commander of the Palace Guard, General Takeshi Mori, when he refused to support the coup. Inside the palace, loyal officials hid the emperor's recorded surrender speech, fearing it would be destroyed if found. The fate of millions now depended on a fragile vinyl record. As dawn approached, the coup began to unravel. Senior generals refused to join the rebellion. Army Minister Anami, though opposed to surrender, refused to support treason. Realizing they had failed, the rebels scattered. Major Hatanaka made one final attempt to rally support by broadcasting propaganda, but it was too late. By morning, the palace was back under loyal control. Hatanaka committed suicide in the streets of Tokyo, his final statement declaring his regret at failing to prevent surrender. At noon on August 15, 1945, radios across Japan crackled to life. For the first time in history, the people heard the voice of their emperor. Hirohito spoke in formal, archaic Japanese, his tone calm and distant. He did not use the word surrender. Instead, he said Japan would endure the unendurable and accept the Allied terms. Many listeners did not fully understand what they were hearing, but they understood one thing clearly: the war was over. Across the empire, reactions were mixed. Some wept with relief, others collapsed in shock. Soldiers stationed across Asia committed suicide rather than accept defeat. In some areas, fighting continued for days or weeks as isolated units refused to believe the announcement. But the machinery of war was finally grinding to a halt. On September 2, 1945, in Tokyo Bay, aboard the battleship USS Missouri, the formal surrender took place. Representatives of the Japanese government, dressed in black mourning coats, walked stiffly onto the deck. Foreign Minister Mamoru Shigemitsu signed the surrender document on behalf of the civilian government, leaning heavily on a cane due to a wartime injury. General Yoshijiro Umezu signed for the Imperial Japanese Army, his face expressionless. Across from them stood General Douglas MacArthur, Supreme Commander for the Allied powers, tall and confident, symbolizing the complete reversal of fortunes. With a few strokes of a pen, World War II officially ended. But the surrender of Japan was not just a military defeat, it was the collapse of an entire world view. The myth of the divine emperor was shattered. The idea that Japan could never be defeated was gone forever. In the months that followed, the country would be occupied, demilitarized, and transformed into a new nation. Emperor Hirohito would renounce his divinity. War crimes trials would expose the darkest chapters of the empire's actions, and the memory of Hiroshima and Nagasaki would haunt the world as a warning of what modern war had become. The final days of the Japanese Empire were not marked by a single moment, but by a chain of irreversible decisions made by exhausted men under unbearable pressure, torn between honor and survival. It was a surrender delayed by pride, accelerated by unimaginable destruction, and finalized by the quiet voice of an emperor choosing life over extinction. And in that choice, the bloodiest war in human history finally came to an end.